My name is Emily. I'm 24 years old and I'm writing to you from Knoxville, Tennessee about this story of mine. Or rather, the events that ruined my life. Even as I write this, those days still flash before my eyes. Everything started 4 years ago. I was a college student and I had a boyfriend I loved very much. His name was Jake. Jake was living in Canada while I was still in the States. We would talk on the phone often and stay in touch. Up until that point, we had always video called. I had never met him in person. I had fallen in love with him without ever seeing him face to face, and I would excitedly imagine the days when we'd finally be together. One day, as I was walking home from class, he called me and said, "I want to meet you in person now. I'm coming to the States in a few days to see you." I waited for him with excitement. At the time, I was studying in Nashville. I thought it would be better to meet him back in my hometown, so I rushed back to Knoxville. Jake was originally from Knoxville, but since he'd grown up in Canada, he didn't visit often. Time passed, and Jake called me to say he'd arrived in town and asked where we should meet. We met at a place called Riverside Park and had a wonderful time talking until evening. We talked about getting to know each other. Then we both went home. Jake was staying at his grandfather's house in a nearby town. My mom already knew about Jake, and I told her that Jake and I had finally met in person. Naturally, she was both excited and surprised. The next morning, she said, "Invite Jake over for breakfast. I'd like to see him. My dear, I can tell he's stolen your heart." I invited Jake over and we had breakfast together. My mom had already taken a liking to him at first sight. "If your relationship is serious, we'd be happy to welcome him into our family," she said. When I heard that, we were both surprised and equally happy. I had been eagerly waiting for that moment. Around that time, I had had the chance to meet some of his family members, but his mother had approached me with a distant and cold attitude. Jake wanted us to bond, of course, and I approached her with a warm smile, but I couldn't break through that coldness. I would later learn the reason for it. As summer approached, we decided to make things official and have an engagement ceremony. Jake's family had come for the meet and greet. Everyone seemed happy and smiling, but the same couldn't quite be said for Jake's mom. She was still the same. During our conversations, she made little cutting remarks and sharp comments. Other than that, it was a pleasant engagement. Time passed, and Jake and I were going out, spending a lot of time together, getting to know each other better. As the end of summer approached and the days to return to school grew near, Jake's mother called me. "Come visit, sweetie. We never got to spend any time together," she said. This surprised me. Maybe this would be the day the nightmare that had taken over my life would begin. Without knowing it, I had waited for that day eagerly. The day came. I went to Jake's mother's invitation without any bad intentions. On the contrary, I was thinking everything was going to be fine. This time she was being kind and warm toward me, but I didn't realize there was something behind it. Maybe she's changed her attitude toward me, I told myself. We all think that sometimes, that people can change. I thought the same. She didn't keep me waiting long. She welcomed me warmly and offered me some refreshments. A glass of iced herbal tea came out. Of course, I didn't refuse. I drank it. We sat in the backyard for a bit and chatted about the wedding and school. As evening came, I went home. I didn't think much of the visit. My mom asked how it went. I told her Jake's mom had been warm and welcoming, and my mom was surprised but happy. "Hopefully it only gets better," she said. That night I went to bed. Around midnight, tired from the day, I decided to sleep. While sleeping, I began to feel a heavy weight on top of me, like being buried under rubble. It pressed harder and harder. I could barely breathe. My eyes were open, but I couldn't move. I felt paralyzed. I couldn't see what the thing on top of me was. When I was a child, my grandmother told me that if you're frightened in your sleep, pray, say the Lord's Prayer or Psalm 23. It came to me. It felt like a sleep paralysis or something worse. The pressure was so intense it felt like my bones would break. I began reciting every prayer I knew in my head. Gradually, it grew lighter. I took a deep breath, told myself, "This happens sometimes," and tried not to take it too seriously. I fell asleep. The next day, I had to head back to school. I said my goodbyes to Jake and got on the bus. By evening, I had reached the city. I picked up my bags and went to the dorm. I ate dinner, showered, and was about to rest when I fell asleep from exhaustion. In my dream, I heard a voice, a deep voice whispering something strange. I was in a quiet, desolate place and kept hearing the same word over and over. It echoed everywhere. I couldn't make it out because of the echo. It sounded like a woman's voice, echoing from every direction. I kept yelling, "Who's there?" but only that word kept answering me. Then my roommate turned on the light and I woke up. It was around 3 in the morning, still half asleep. I didn't think much of it. I was probably just dreaming from exhaustion and went back to sleep. By morning, my roommates were eagerly asking about the engagement. We spent the day talking. The next day, school started. I was a junior now. A new semester was beginning. I had already settled into the environment and become close as siblings with everyone. I was a successful student and had caught people's attention. As time went on, sleep paralysis episodes began increasing and nightmares multiplied. I was frequently waking up screaming or gasping from what I'd seen in my dreams. My roommates would gather around, worried about me. I was scared to fall back asleep after waking up in a panic. So I'd sit until the morning call or read a book to pass the time. Because when I slept again, the nightmares would continue. I was spiraling into depression. I was going to class sleep, deprived, and my face had started to look hollow. Meanwhile, the stress from exhaustion and the depression led to frequent arguments with Jake. Jake's mom had been calling me, asking how I was doing, whether I needed anything. Days passed like this. I began losing weight and losing my appetite. I couldn't focus in class. Sometimes I would doze off during lectures, which caught the teacher's attention. They would pull me aside and ask. I told them I was just tired and not sleeping enough. When I returned from school to the dorm that day, I ate and rested. My eyes were drooping from exhaustion. I hadn't been able to hold out against the fatigue and must have drifted off. This time it felt like I was in a different dimension the moment my eyes closed. I heard that sound again. The strange word began ringing in my ears. Then I saw a figure. I couldn't make out the face. You could tell it was a woman, or at least it resembled a woman. The moment she reached her hand out toward me, she began laughing in a disgusting way. Her laughing voice echoed and seemed to pierce right through me. It was a horrible sound. When she reached her hand out, I saw that her fingers stretched out for what seemed like meters. I screamed in fear and as I did, she forced something into my mouth. She shoved it down my throat, all the way to my lungs it seemed. It felt like she was ripping something out from inside me. I felt it so deeply, so physically. I woke up in a violent coughing fit. I looked at my hand and saw a few drops of blood. In a panic, I was screaming, "I'm dying." My roommates had gotten up and rushed to my side. They immediately called an ambulance and took me to the hospital. The doctor ran tests and examined me. He said my throat was inflamed but kept me overnight just in case. I was shaken. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Could the figure in my dream have actually done this to me? Was that even possible? I kept thinking about it. Maybe it was just the exhaustion. But something like this shouldn't be possible, I thought. My roommate Sasha stayed by my side that night. I couldn't sleep for fear of dreaming again. When the doctor came back for a follow-up, he noticed the dark circles under my eyes and asked if I used alcohol or drugs. I said I didn't, but that I had been extremely tired and sleep-deprived for days. When he asked why, I told him everything. Like any doctor, he referred me to a neurologist and a psychiatrist. Meanwhile, my boyfriend Jake had been told about it by my roommate. He was panicked and scared and said he was going to buy a flight ticket and come. I said, "Please don't leave your work and travel all this way. We're getting married soon and we'll need that money. I'll be discharged tomorrow. Nothing serious." Jake calmed down a bit. "If anything serious happens and you hide it from me, we're going to have a serious problem, princess," he said. I said, "We'll be the first to know, don't worry." Morning came. I left the hospital and went back to the dorm. I didn't want to go to class anymore. It felt like my will to live was fading. I lay there like a corpse all day. People around me noticed my state and asked why I wasn't going to class. I had become snappy and irritable. Sometimes I would respond coldly to people. I went back to the dorm, had breakfast, and fell asleep again for a few hours. Again, I saw her in my dream. Again that word. But this time, she was very close. Because everything was dark around me, I could make out her face more clearly. Her face and the burning, horrible smell that seeped into my body, like an animal left to rot for days. I was barely holding myself back from vomiting. She had long nails. The spaces under her nails looked filled with dirt. She pushed me and knocked me down. My body ached like several bones had been broken. She climbed over me and began repeating that word again. I still couldn't understand it clearly. She was so strong I couldn't resist her. She dug her sharp nails, like knives, repeatedly into my stomach. It felt like my joints were being torn apart. My roommate had come back from school and woke me up. "What happened to you? Why are you so drenched in sweat? Did you have another nightmare?" she asked with a trembling voice. "Yes," I said, because the nightmare was still fresh. Thank God it was just a nightmare, I thought. My back was aching badly. There were scratches on my back. I was starting to really fear for my sanity. Day and night, it didn't matter. She was always there in my dreams. I'd jolt awake in the morning, screaming. The first thing I did was go to a psychologist. When I described what was happening, she said it was the beginning of depression. She prescribed antidepressants to help me get through this phase more gently. As for the marks on my body, she suggested I might have done them myself. Use the medication regularly and your sleep schedule will stabilize, she said. I started taking the medication. It made me feel drowsy. The days were passing in a fog of sleep. I was only talking to Jake once a day. I started going back to class but couldn't focus. After class, my friends wanted to go sit somewhere and said school was boring today. I figured it might clear my head, so I agreed. We chatted for a while, and I told them about the recent events and the nightmares. Some didn't believe me. Some looked at me like I was crazy. Seeing those looks, I didn't push it further. One night, falling asleep from exhaustion, I somehow drifted off again. This time, as soon as my eyes closed, I felt like I was in another dimension. And again, I heard the sound, the strange, echoing word. But this time the room suddenly felt ice cold. I was wide awake, yet frozen stiff. I felt as though something was watching me from a corner of the room. I was breathing deeply in fear, because the horrible smell from my dreams was now very much alive and real in that room. The silence was broken only by that thing's rasping, animal-like breathing. I was terrified and on the verge of throwing up from the smell. Unable to take it anymore, I slowly turned my head. Oh my God, what I saw there in the corner. Matted, filthy hair covering its face, hanging down what seemed like yards. I could make out most of its face. It was a greyish, rubbery color, no pupils, eyes solid black, lips bruised purple, sharp teeth. Its clothes were dirty, old, tattered. I couldn't see its feet because I didn't have the courage to turn all the way around. But I had seen the face and those eyes. I was terrified. I wanted to pray but couldn't put the words together from fear. And when I stumbled on the words, it must have found it amusing. It let out a horrible, disgusting laugh. You think you can scare me away? I'll leave when I want to, it said. I tried to pray again. This time the words came to me. Trembling, I managed to say a prayer. In the name of God, I rebuke you. The moment I said it, the creature let out a piercing shriek in the room. An icy wind swept through and it vanished. God, what was that? In shock, I began sobbing uncontrollably. How long would this go on? I couldn't express myself to anyone because I was afraid of being thought insane. And most importantly, I hadn't told Jake about any of this. I didn't want him looking at me like I was crazy either. I waited until morning. In the morning, the first thing I did was call my mom and tell her everything in detail. She was devastated when she heard. She cried. I couldn't hold it in either. I was completely overwhelmed by everything. Then my mom said she would look into someone who could help. In the meantime, don't just sit around. Pray. Go to church if you can. These spiritual things don't like faith, she said. I went outside and got some fresh air. After a few hours wandering, my mom called back. Honey, there's someone here in town. They say he really understands these things. Come home, let me take you to him. I'm scared something bad is going to happen to you, she said. Okay, Mom, I replied. If I can find a bus tonight, I'll be on it. Otherwise, tomorrow. I called the station, and sure enough, there was a ticket that night. I booked it immediately. I went back to the dorm, packed a small bag, and headed to the terminal. I got the bus ticket and waited for departure. Thank goodness. By morning I'd be home. While waiting, I called Jake and talked to him. I told him I was going home. He found it odd for me to be going home during the school semester, but I told him I was homesick and would stay for a couple of days and come back. The journey began. While I stared out the window, my eyes grew heavy. I drifted off. In my dream, I was somehow both inside the moving bus and standing on the side of a dark, desolate road, a figure that closely resembled me, but wasn't me, stood on the roadside. I could tell from its cunning, terrifying eyes that it wasn't human. I woke up in a panic. The bus driver noticed and brought me some water. "Are you okay?" he said. "I'm fine, I'm okay," I replied. A few hours later, morning came, and the bus entered the Knoxville city limits. My mom had stayed up all night. She called me at the first light of dawn. Dad was going to pick me up from the station. The bus arrived at the terminal. Dad was waiting by the side. I grabbed my bags from the luggage hold and went to him. He loaded my things into the car. My mom had already told him everything. He looked at me with sad, loving eyes. "Are you okay, honey?" he said. "I'm fine. Dad, I'll be even better," I replied. We arrived home. Mom met us at the door. When she saw me, there was a mix of joy and sorrow on her face. We chatted a bit, had breakfast, and then, since I was exhausted, I went to rest. I fell asleep again. In my dream, I saw her again. This time, she was angry and furious. "You are not going to that man. If you go, I will kill every one of you," she said, and came at me. She squeezed my throat so hard, her nails digging into my skin, feeling like they were piercing through. I was crying from the pain, hitting her to make her let go. Then my mom shook me awake. "Are you okay? Come on, sweetie, get up. We have to go. The healer is waiting for us," she said. "Mom, I saw her in my dream," I said. "She doesn't want me to go there. She said she'd kill all of us if I went." "Mom, I'm so scared," I said and started crying. "She's just trying to scare you, honey," my mom said. "God is watching over you. We have to deal with this." Reluctantly, I washed up and got ready. We set off. The healer's house wasn't far, about 15 or 20 minutes away. When we arrived, his wife opened the door and led us inside. She showed us to the living room and said, "Have a seat, Mr. Harold will be right with you." Before long, he came out. He was an older man in his 70s, but looked strong and sharp for his age. He asked me to explain everything from the beginning. I told him everything, every detail. He listened, nodding. Then he said, "Come with me. I need to perform a few procedures." We went into a small side room. There were candles, old books, a mirror, papers covered in handwritten symbols, and on the floor a large copper bowl. Around it, candles arranged in a circle. The room was dimly lit. He did what he needed to do. He drew a circle and told me to sit inside it, with him sitting across from me. "In a moment, I am going to call the entity that is disturbing you here. When you see it, do not be afraid and do not step outside the circle," he said. Then he placed a copper dish in the center, filled it with water, and dropped small pieces of paper with symbols written on them into the water. "Give me your hand," he said. He made a small cut on my finger with a small blade and let a few drops fall into the dish. He began reading in a low murmur. As he read, the water in the dish began to move, as if boiling. After a while, his breath grew labored as he read. His voice shifted slightly at the end. Then, as he finished, a black stain began to appear on the wall. The room's atmosphere changed. The stain grew and sharpened on the wall. Then it appeared, the same entity I had seen in my nightmares and in the dawn. Just like before, I nearly panicked. The healer spoke to the entity, and it responded. They conversed for a while, the entity's voice echoing horribly through the room. When they finished, the entity let out a shriek and vanished in a cloud of black smoke. Everything in the room returned to normal. The healer brought me back to the living room. "Sit down, honey," he said. He began to explain. "A curse has been placed on you. If you had waited a few more days, or if you hadn't told your family, they would have taken you over completely." "What do you mean? Who would do something like this to me?" "Why?" I asked. He said, "The entity attached to you is a female spirit. In old folk practice, it's sometimes called ascending, something summoned and directed. Jake's mother didn't want you to be with her son, so she had this placed on you. She wanted to marry her son off to someone else, to a girl she had already chosen. The plan was, the spirit would torment you in your dreams, and then in real life, you'd lose your mind. Jake would think you'd gone crazy, break up with you, and marry the girl his mother wanted. Your life would be ruined, and the spirit would have claimed you completely." As I listened, I felt sick with fear and rage. "But you said a prayer that night in the dorm. In the name of God, you rebuked it. That wounded the spirit. It was waiting for a moment when your guard was down. Before it could finish the job, you came here. My mom and I were both shaking. How could someone be so cruel?" The healer told us what to do next. He said the curse could only be fully broken if I walked away from Jake for good and took care of my own life. He also gave me a blessed object, a small pouch with protective herbs and prayers inside, and told me to keep it on me at all times, even in the shower. "Come back in 2 days and I'll complete the final step," he said, and walked us to the door. On the way home, my mom and I talked about everything. We were both furious and heartbroken. How was I going to explain this to Jake? 2 days later we went back. The healer had one final ritual to do. He made a deal with the spirit. If his mother's hold on the spirit was broken, the spirit would be freed from its contract and would stop tormenting me. When it was done, he said, "You should be free now, but make a clean break from that family, honey. The danger is over, but stay far away from them." When I got home, I called Jake. I told him everything from the beginning. He was quiet for a long time, and then said, "I can't believe my mother would do something like this. Maybe you were just seeing things. I've known my mother my whole life. She wouldn't do this." That was the last straw. After everything I had been through, the one person I needed to believe me didn't. I was heartbroken and furious. I told him off through tears. "You weren't there. You slept soundly every night while I woke up in terror, night after night, because of what your mother did. And now I'm a liar to you. This is over." I hung up. I had made my decision. I couldn't spend the rest of my life with a man who called me a liar after everything I had suffered. I told my mom. She was exhausted by it all too. "Do whatever you feel is right, honey," she said. We boxed up the engagement ring and sent it back by mail. I got a new phone number. Then I went back to school. The days passed. School, studying. I was back to my old self. My professors noticed the improvement. Friends asked about the ring. I told them we had grown apart, different paths in life, and changed the subject. Slowly, Jake began to fade from my memory. At first it was hard, but I couldn't keep people in my life who had hurt me like that. Junior year was over. Senior year began. Slowly, the excitement of graduation started to build. Over the summer, I heard rumors through mutual people that Jake had gotten engaged. Blessings to them, I said, and moved on. There was still a small sting inside, but that was all. Senior year was full of exams and papers, then finals, then graduation. After graduation ceremonies, my parents came down. It was a happy day. Mom mentioned she'd heard Jake had gotten engaged to someone else back in Canada. Blessings, I said again, and let it go. After graduation, I got a new CM card, came home to Knoxville, and started preparing for my career certification exams. One day, my aunt called and invited me to dinner. Her house happened to be near Jake's grandfather's old neighborhood. Seeing the street brought everything back. At dinner, my aunt pulled me aside. "Emily, sweetheart, I ran into Jake's aunt the other day," she said quietly. "Stay calm when you hear this. About a year ago, Jake was found dead in a forest near their home in Canada. It was extremely violent. The Canadian police investigated for a long time but couldn't find the perpetrator, and the case was closed as unsolved." She paused. "And shortly after that, Jake's mother had a breakdown. She's been in a psychiatric facility for the past year. Her condition is very bad. They give her electroshock treatments. She keeps screaming that she can see things that aren't there, that they're coming to take her and her family." I said, "God help her." But in the back of my mind, I thought of what the healer had said. The person who did this to you will get their own reckoning, and it will be terrible. It seemed what he meant had come to pass. I felt truly sorry for Jake. He didn't deserve it. But his mother had sold her soul for what she wanted, and she lived with those consequences. God forbid anyone goes through what I went through, and God forbid anyone be led astray from the right path. That's my story, friends. Thank you for listening. I love you all so much. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please subscribe and turn on notifications to be alerted when new videos come out. See you.